Hello, and welcome to Cocktails with a Twist of History, your digital destination for all things cocktails. So today I would like to talk about FDR and the politics of cocktails, or maybe the cocktails of politics. We'll figure out which one. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born in 1882, and he died in office in 1945. He was also known as FDR, and he was the 32nd President of the United States. He served from 1933 until his death in 1945. He was the longest serving U.S. president and also the only one that ever served for more than 2 terms. Franklin D. Roosevelt was also known to have a fondness for martinis. He traveled with a special martini kit, and he was known to experiment with his recipes. Sometimes got a little bit strange, but he would put things like olive brine or absinthe, sometimes fruit juice into it. He was known to garnish it with both a lemon and an olive, something you don't see a lot of. But some insiders, including his grandson, said that he was a poor bartender. Aside from the lemon and the olive together, I don't think he was really a poor bartender. I think if he was making a dirty martini, which is a martini with olive brine in it or olive juice in it, then it probably was not very popular yet, and so it may have tasted the way it's supposed to, and they just didn't know what it was supposed to taste like. So it could have been a very good martini. I have had my share of dirty martinis. But aside from making martinis, FDR did a lot of stuff as president. He was the president during the Great Depression. He was the creator of the New Deal, which were programs to help the poor and to try and get the United States back on its feet after the Depression. He was also the president when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Roosevelt was the one who made the declaration of war, bringing the United States into World War II. There are those that say it probably would have happened anyway or whatever, but he was really the president at the time. Now remember, World War II, the United States was on the side of the Allied powers, which included some major countries like the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, China. Now the Allied powers, the people who were the leaders of those countries were Franklin D. Roosevelt for the United States, Winston Churchill for the United Kingdom, and Joseph Stalin for the Soviet Union. In November of 1943, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin had a meeting to discuss the war and the post-war plans, and this was called the Tehran Conference. Now, this was where Roosevelt met Stalin for the first time. Britain and the United States had committed to opening another front against the Germans in 1944, while Stalin committed to entering the war against Japan. Didn't exactly work that way, but a lot of complications in that. During the Tehran Conference, though, Roosevelt insisted on making Stalin a martini. And this was the first martini that Stalin ever had. Vodka drinker, probably straight. Here it was all of a sudden a gin martini. Stalin was known to have said, quote, "It was cold on the stomach, but he liked it." How's that for making alliances? Okay, I have been talking way too long without a drink in my hand. Let's make FDR's favorite martini. Now, he made a shaken martini, not a stirred one. This was way before James Bond, but okay. And he made a gin martini. Now, we're going to make it similar to the way he made it, but I will tell you that when I make a martini with vermouth, I use less vermouth than the recipe says. And if I'm making a dirty martini, I will use less brine than the recipe says as well. So I'm going to make it the way I like it. I'm going to post it as the way he made it. You can adjust it as you like or experiment. So the very first thing that he would do is he would take a chilled martini glass, and we said that's the martini glass. It's called the martini glass. Everyone knows that's the famous shape of the cocktail. And he would rub the lemon around the outside of the glass. So I'm doing it on the inside and the outside. Now again, this is going to have lemon and olive. I don't usually make it like that, but we are going to try it. I am not going to keep the lemon inside. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. Okay, he used a full 2 ounces of gin, and we're going to need a shaker. There's our shaker. And we're going to use a full 2 ounces of gin. Here, we're going to use the other shaker. Sorry about that. And here we have our gin. Now I'm going to put in a full 2 ounces. Hold on. And here we go. 2 ounces of gin. All right. Now, he says to use 1 ounce of dry vermouth. Like I said, I'm going to use slightly less than that. But, you know, still considerable amount. There we go. And he used a teaspoon of olive brine. Now, this was what they would call a 2-1-1 recipe. 2 ounces of gin, 1 ounce of dry vermouth, 1 teaspoon of the brine. Here we go. Here's my brine. I'm going to put that in, and I put it all into the shaker. Now, we are going to get our ice. And like I always say, got to use plenty of ice. So if you're going to shake it, got to shake it with a lot of ice. Normally, I used to be a person who would shake a martini back in the old days. Then I switched to only stirring martinis. But we are going to shake this one. That's the way he did it. Hold on. Now put our cover on. Put the cover cap on. Like I always say, hold it. And we're going to shake. You don't really need to shake this a lot. There's no juice in it, which is why normally a martini would be stirred, not shaken. But here we go. And we're going to pour it into our martini glass. And there we go. Now you can see it's cloudy. That's the big difference between shaking it and stirring it. Stirring it will be much clearer. The brine and the vermouth also tend to make it a little cloudy, but not really. Now, interesting, I'm going to use olives for the garnish. I didn't hear anything about him saying the odd number of olives. We've talked about this before. It's bad luck to have an even number of olives, but okay, I used 3. Figure if he's the president of the United States, he can have 3 olives. And cheers. That's actually a really nice martini. I used a little less olive brine than he said, but I happen to really like this. Martini is supposed to be served very, very cold, and that it is. The truth of the matter is, when you shake it, it does get colder. That's the theory, one of the theories of shaking versus stirring, because it does get colder, but and you can see it does clear up a little bit, but still cloudy for what you would call a martini, which really should be clear. But it's okay. It's good. I happen to like it. Now, just a note, Churchill was also another martini drinker, and he made stirred martinis, but he also made them a little bit different. His were 3 or more ounces of London dry gin. After all, he was the Prime Minister of England, so he made the London dry gin. He also used green olives, but he would stir the gin with the ice while glancing at an unopened bottle of dry vermouth. Julia Childs, remember we said she would make it and bow in the direction, hold the vermouth and bow in the direction of France. So bottom line, they drank straight gin. That was chilled. But okay. Dry vermouth is also called French vermouth, and we know how much the English like the French. That's sarcastic in case you couldn't tell. Some people say that FDR was the first to have a dirty martini. I don't think so. I'll explain why later. But some people say he was the first to have a legal martini after Prohibition. Considering he was the one that signed the 21st Amendment, which was the amendment that took away prohibition, so he could have been the very first one, or at least maybe he was the first one to have a legal martini in the White House. That's also possible. By the way, interesting, the repeal of the 18th Amendment, which was the amendment to create prohibition, the amendment was the 21st Amendment. It was the first time that one amendment abolished a previous one. I found that interesting. After Prohibition, FDR was known to hold court in the White House in something he would call the Children's Hour. Strange, but okay. And he would have this every day where he would gather select members of his inner circle and he would make a batch of martinis and they would discuss whatever issues of the day. The reason that I say that FDR was not the first one to create a dirty martini was that the first documentation for a dirty martini, which actually had olives muddled into it as well as a splash of the olive brine, and that was by a bartender named John E. O'Connor at the Waldorf Astoria in New York in 1901. Roosevelt would have been 19 at the time. I don't think he had such a sophisticated palate at 19, but you know. While the term dirty martini was used later on, and that was first used in a cocktail book by a guy named G.H. Steele, and the name of the book was, get this, My New Cocktail Book, and that was in 1930. As always, if you have other stories or other information, we want to hear it. Please, you can email it to us, you can put it in the comments, or you can tell it to the bottle. We want to know. Also, don't forget, we want you to like, we want you to subscribe, we want you to follow, we want you to put things in the comments so we know you're out there, so that we can bring you more episodes of Cocktails with a Twist of History. Thank you.